Day 4 of this cast on grip build. And in this video I'll be showing you like the deeps, the attack speed, the gem links, and how my gear is going. I'll show that in every video. So, and then after that I'll talk about like your gear upgrade priorities, what you want to shoot for, and what kind of things you should consider when buying your gear. And then after that I'll play a map and give some tips for mapping. Right now I'm 93. I have 2 days, 2 hours played, 47 minutes. Yeah, when I tell you the tips for mappings, it'll be more for like trying to not die, prevent death prevention, because at the higher levels, if you die, you lose a lot of EXP and it's kind of irritating. So my stats right now is 4 attacks per second. If I summon my golem, my crit chance is 59.1 in town. This is without Malagaros. I'm using some ES gloves right now. More than that later, but if I start like using a movement skill, it goes to 4.52. My whirling blades 1.2. 149 increase main hand attack speed modifier. If I use a movement skill, it goes to 171. My ES is, let me turn this on. There you go, 9k ES with these stats, and my damage I'll show you as well. Okay. Damage is 28k. Now, if you have a face breaker instead of this ES gloves, then you can hit like 36k, which should be around 3.5k per discharge. But since I don't have those, my discharge damage is about 2.8k per discharge. So, I mean per charge of discharge. So those are the numbers you can be expecting to hit when you don't have any spell damage on here and don't have any spell damage on here. So, and you take this kind of tree where you pick up like only spell damage over here, and all the crit nodes. So that's what you should be expecting with those kind of stats. Okay, let me explain the gear priorities. So once you have a Vagin Dagger and a 4-link and a Vol's Protector, what you want next is a 5-link, and then after that you want to get your base ES high enough to switch to like CI, or stay as hybrid but have enough survivability. So you want something around like 300 shield, 250 to 300, and like a 300 helm and a 300 shield, and with like a 110 boot or something, and that should push you around like 5.5k. If you finish a Trickster, Ascendancy, and Merciless, get Shade Form, that should push you around 7k. And after that, it's pretty much upgrading the gear slowly. Once you get those set, you're like 7k ES. I think the next biggest upgrade would be Vol's Devotion. Right now, the prices are pretty cheap because of Kadiro and because Onslaught is a cheaper map for Xana. So this is your like next biggest upgrade. And after the Vol's Devotion, right now it's 12, but earlier today it was 10. If you do like the Brittle Emperor, these things the time I'm searching right now is really not optimal, but these were like 1 exalt at prime time. So those are the prices right now. I got mine for like 7 exalt, 60 chaos, and like 20 regal, which comes out to around 8.5, which should be around what it's worth. So that's like your next biggest upgrade. And beyond that, it would just be upgrading your ES on your equipments, and then using fusings to get a 6-link. The rest of the gear is not too critical. I would also mention that reduced flash charges used on a belt is very powerful, so you don't have to get tri-res on belt if you don't need it. The gloves. So I was using Malagaros for a long time. It's totally fine if you use ES gloves. I mean, I was using Facebreaker, but I bricked them now because I used Vol and they went to yellow. So you can use that, or you can use some ES gloves if you need the resist, or if you like the survivability, or you could use Voidbringers. They're not bad ES gloves as well. And Malagaros works too. So that's the kind of stuff you're looking for your gloves. The rest of it is just you kind of have to shop for gear, your ES gear. So I showed you guys a little bit of that demonstration in the past, but I'll show you again. If you search for helmet, you can just search for some sort of like 300 ES helm and try to find something there. As you can see, they get quite pricey, but there's some as low as like 7C, so it's really not that expensive to start up. It's only when you want to start upgrading past like 300, like 20 ES with double res or something like that, it gets quite pricey. So I showed you last time how you can search for the hybrid role by searching for the hybrid stun recovery energy shield. You want to put a maximum on them and then search for like a minimum shield, something like this, and then you have to make sure that it has an open prefix, and that's pretty much the only thing you have to do to find anything craftable. And that's a tip that you can do. For example, this one, it's 40 and 8, and that is not they're not in the same mod. Like a hybrid role will be like something like 12 or 13. If you're not sure, you go to poeaffix.net and you check that kind of stuff on the helm. So you see here 40 energy shield and 8 stun recovery. If you have 40 energy shield, it should fall between 12 and 13. Keep in mind, there's rare instances where the stun recovery is actually a separate role and they just happen to be like lined up as separate. So that can happen too. So don't be too upset if you can't find something that is craftable. Another example right here, 2710. So this thing should be a hybrid. So let me show you what you can calculate the energy shield as. So if it is the 217.61, how much energy shield will you get when you craft the 68%? For example, what you do is you take your 217.61 and you divide it by all the quality on it. So you divide by 1, the base value, plus 0.27 plus 0.2, because it's 0.2 from the quality and then 27% from the energy shield hybrid. So that's your base energy shield. So as you can see, it's 148. A hubris is 100 and this has 48 base. So then you multiply that by 1.47 plus, say you roll top on the top end on the Haku mod, and then that will give you a 320 energy shield helm. So to find what energy shield you would have after you craft it, you just divide the shield value by the percentages, the sum of the percentages, and then multiply by the total percentage that you're going to get. Either that, or you can find the base value of a hubris, which is 100. You add 48, and then you multiply by 1 plus 0.2 quality plus 0.27 hybrid plus 0.68. You can do that, and it will have the same value. So you can calculate it that way. So that's all I wanted to show you for this kind of video, how to calculate the energy shield when you want to know what would happen if you craft it. So that's for buying gears. The rest of my gear is I switched up the flask. I think diamond is pretty mandatory on this build. It increases the deeps by quite a bit. And the only bad thing is it can't refill on bosses because diamonds cannot roll a chance to get a flash charge when you deal a critical strike. That's the only bad thing about it. The rest of it, you want to roll anti-freeze and anti-bleed. My bleed is on the diamond. It's not like completely safe, but it works out fine. And the rest of it's just like immune to shock or immune to curse is pretty nice too. And you want to roll the surgeons with your quicksilver, and the reason for that is, as I explained in the last video, you want to click really close to your character, but if you have faster move speed, you can have somewhat of a farther clicking and still reset your cyclone quite quickly. So, I have 30 move speed boots with quicksilver and the flask nose, and it pushes me to 126. It's like decent move speed, especially when cycloning. Makes it clear faster. So I'm gonna place one map for you guys, show you how this build goes usually, and give you some tips if you don't want to die while you're leveling. So just do some like air lakes. I've been running just 76s, 75s, 77s a day. Nothing special. You don't really have to run the highest maps to get levels. You just have to run a lot of them. So basically, when you're mapping around like this, what you want to do is you want to make sure that you're always playing towards the more safe side. And what that means is you want to always play in a way that compensates for the worst case scenario. For example, this one has rare monsters, okay? So an example is rare monsters spawn with volatile sometimes, like these dudes. this guy is a soul eater, but sometimes they're like volatiles, and you know, sometimes they come out with reflect as well. So if it's a volatile reflect and it's like something like the monster has added cold or whatever, or added fire, and then say you're also in a minus max, things can get a little iffy when you start reflecting yourself and then the volatile explodes on you. You can get one shot pretty quickly. So in those kinds of situations, what you want to do is you want to play in a way that makes it so you don't die in those situations. And for that specific example is what you do is whenever you see it reflect, you should always check if it's volatile, and if it's volatile, don't mess with it, or be very careful, because it could instigate you in very bad scenarios. So unless you know exactly what you're doing, then don't do that. Oh, by the way, I'm leveling up a lot of discharges to attempt to get 2020 by corrupting, to attempt to get 2120 by corrupting them. So I mean, it's not very common that these things occur. Maybe like one in um, one in like 100 rares has a reflect and a volatile, but the times that it happens, it can get really dangerous, and you don't want to have to um, die to those things. So you got to play in a way that prevents it, even if it only happens like 1 in 100 times. So the most common things that kill you on this character are like bearers, porcupines, strongbox, detonate dead. You're messing up your flash usage and you don't have like anti-freeze or anti-bleed, or you know, as I explained, a reflect and a volatile. So I think the most dangerous is probably bearers. And the way you prevent that is you always play assuming that every single monster is a bearer. And that sounds a little bit ridiculous when you're mapping, but as you can see, I don't ever want to backtrack. Like, for example, these magic monsters, you never want to backtrack unless you're absolutely certain it's bearers. And for just regular monsters, don't backtrack unless you know exactly what it is. That way you don't have to die to bearers like 1 in 1,000 times that it happens to be a bearer. You just don't pay attention, you backtrack, and you're dead. So you want to play in a way that you know, compensates for the worst case scenario when you're playing in a map. And it gets really iffy when there's certain map mods on for bearers. The dangerous ones are like fleet and minus max. Fleet makes the bearers explode quicker, I think, and the minus max makes you take like an absurd amount of damage. Stuff like Porkies, you gotta have a granite flask. If you have a granite flask and cast 1 damage taken a mortal call, I'm not running one because I'm trying to level up as many gems as possible. But if you have a cast 1 damage or mortal call, you should be okay against Porkies. And strongbox detonate dead. If you YOLO open strongboxes, just make sure that you assume every single one's detonate dead and run away. And don't mess up your flask ever. That's pretty much it. Flask are a huge part of the survivability for this build. If you stick with your flask always up, you should be okay in the most part. It's very difficult to die unless you have some really bad scenarios. And reduced flash charge used on Bell, again, very good. And you want to roll surgeons and everything for the boss fights. You can use charge recovery if you don't feel like you need it for the bosses. But yeah, that's pretty much it. In the next video, I'll be like doing the same thing, highlighting my gear upgrades, and showing you my stats and how the character's progressing, and maybe give you some more tips. So that's it for today.